Hello and welcome to this presentation on sustainability and Crossrail, or the Elizabeth line. I'm Rob Paris, Head of Sustainability and Consents.
And I'm Lorna Mellings, Crossrail Environment Manager.
And we'll be spending the next 30 minutes or so with you walking around a new railway and viewing it through the lens of sustainability. That wonderful introductory film ably illustrates the transport system that will be delivered once it opens. However, delivering Crossrail has always been about so much more than just the physical railway. Its existence will provide opportunities and benefits way beyond simply moving people from one place to another. And its construction, whilst posing significant challenges in terms of impacts on people and places, has also provided us with the opportunity to give a little something back at the same time. So welcome, this is the sustainability story of Crossrail, using the design, delivery and operation of the new railway to promote benefits to the environment, society and the economy as a whole. As you might expect, our sustainability tour this morning begins with climate change. The media has recently been full of the unfolding climate crisis, images of forest fires, torrential rain, catastrophic flooding and previously almost inconceivable temperatures in Europe and globally. And Crossrail has a 120-year design life. Not only that, our eastern tunnels from Canary Wharf Station through to Plumstead Portal lie in the floodplains of the rivers Thames and Lee. And so, as you can see, the potential impacts of climate change have been a key consideration for us from the outset, the need to protect the railway from future climate impacts. Now, the floodplains are, of course, defended, and you'll be familiar perhaps with things like the Thames Barrier. But a failure of those defences would lead to the flooding of Crossrail tunnels, and because we're linked to the underground, could go even further than that. So we worked very closely at the very beginning of the design with the Environment Agency, which is the government's body that's responsible for flood protection and management. And we modelled what the flood levels would be in the year 2100 if there's what is known as a 1 in 1,000 year adverse weather event, and if London's flood defences failed. So we modelled a truly catastrophic scenario. And once we had predictions of what the flood levels would be, we set about designing Crossrail so that as far as possible, it would be passively protected from those flood levels. And passively protection simply means things like flood wall protection, and keeping the track bed raised high so that, simply speaking, the water can't ingress into the system. And where we couldn't achieve all that we wanted to and needed to out of passive protection, we identified what we call active flood protection measures, things like stop logs. And they are quite simply barriers that you might put into a portal just to prevent water from gaining ingress. So looking at the pictures here, on the left, you can see our station at Canary Wharf. That was an interesting one. We actually built the station, of course, in the dock, and that took up flood storage capacity. So our partner, the Canary Wharf Group, actually designed a flood capacity scheme that was able to compensate for that loss. It took in the flood water, or will take in the flood water as and when it occurs, and later on as the levels decline, so they can pump it back out. And then on the top right and bottom right, you can see Victoria Dock Portal and North Woolwich Portal. And Victoria Dock Portal, for example, is one of those locations where stop logs have been identified as a possible flood protection measure. Finally, it's worth noting that Crossrail is powered from the national grid. And so we've made sure to put our main bulk supply points outside of the floodplains, you'll be happy to know. And each of those, there is a redundancy one for the other. So if one of those were to fail, the other one can continue to power the whole of the railway. So that's all about the impacts of climate change on Crossrail. But what about Crossrail and its impact on climate, its carbon contribution? So as you can imagine, operating and constructing Crossrail could make a significant impact in terms of carbon emissions. And so we initially set about developing what we call a carbon footprint. And you can see that here in this pie chart. And with a 120-year design life, it's hardly surprising that most of our carbon emissions are during the operations. This covers 120 years, approximately 80%. And approximately 20% would be from construction carbon. Now, another thing to know about Crossrail is that we also knew from our calculations that the existence of Crossrail, replacing older diesel services and electrical services with brand new modern and energy efficient ones, would actually present an operational saving in carbon. And we were able to look at what that saving would be and see whether or not it could actually pay back the construction carbon we would emit. And it does. And our first calculations showed us that we could achieve that payback in something like 8 to 13 years. And so what we then set ourselves was, well, how could we improve on that? What things could we do? And the things we could control were our construction energy and embodied energy. That's the energy of our materials, our concrete, our steel. The first generation of mechanical and electrical plant that we design and install, and of course, the first generation of rolling stock. The things that we can't control are what the grid mix will be, albeit we know that the government is increasing the renewable element of that all the time. And of course, what the later generations of plant and rolling stock would achieve in terms of energy efficiency themselves. So looking at energy efficient design, Crossrail central stations are almost all underground. So that made it very challenging trying to get daylight down into the stations, but we did achieve that at 2 locations. Top left, you can see light coming down through a glass canopy at Paddington, and bottom left, you can see light coming into Woolwich station. Because they're subsurface stations and there will be new buildings over the top of them, it was also very difficult to locate things like solar photovoltaic panels. But we found opportunities, and you can see here in top right, we managed to place them at Whitechapel station, and bottom right, that's actually on our depot out at Old Oak Common. And moving inside the buildings, we replaced all the standard light fittings that were originally in the specifications with LED lighting, light emitter diode lighting, which is 62% more energy efficient than those standard lighting fittings. And we've got an awful lot of lifts and escalators, as you can imagine. And so we set about creating a high specification of energy efficiency for that. So that was 23% more energy efficient than the standard London Underground specifications of the time. And just to walk you through what I'm showing you here, the top left shows you our inclined lift at Liverpool Street Station. Bottom left is the escalators at Canary Wharf. Top right shows you in particular our LED lighting at Paddington, and similarly bottom right is Tottenham Court Road. And construction. So what could we do about reducing our construction emissions? We sat down with our contractors very early on, and we established an 8% reduction target over the baseline of what they would have emitted if they hadn't instigated any programs at our requirements. They set out then to engage in a number of programs, and there are a lot of sort of individual items that I can point to that they achieved. So looking at the pictures here, LED lighting towers, more energy efficient lighting towers to light the works, even a hydrogen fueled solar panel noise monitor, no less. And hybrid excavators and other hybrid equipment. And when we wrapped up these programs in 2018, we'd actually achieved an 18.6% saving in carbon, smashing that target of 8. And that equates to something like £2 million of saving in fuel and energy efficiency. So certainly a great achievement by our contractors. And finally, the other potential big win for us was the rolling stock. We set 2 targets for our rolling stock around energy efficiency and carbon. Firstly, we looked at the weight. Heavy trains are more energy demanding trains. And so we said that a Crossrail train should not exceed more than 350 tonnes. And then we set also an energy efficiency target of 24 kilowatt hours per train, which equates to, or would equate to, about 55 grams of carbon dioxide per passenger kilometre on the system. And Bombardier was the contractor that successfully won to the design and delivery of our rolling stock. And Bombardier has a lot of experience in the aerospace industry, and they brought that to bear on the design of our trains. And they smashed that weight target. A Crossrail train weighs 319 tonnes. And when we came to run the trains and measure the energy efficiency, they've achieved 14 kilowatt hours per train. So that's 32 grams of carbon dioxide per passenger kilometre. And that makes Crossrail trains amongst the best in their class for energy efficiency. And what does that all add up to? Well, you remember that at the beginning there, I said about how we had a payback period of 8 to 13 years. So now we recently recalculated it all just last year, and our payback period is now between 4 and 10 years. So a really wonderful result, something of which we're very proud.
Using resources developed by the Waste Resources Action Programme, Crossrail undertook a series of designing out waste workshops with our designers and contractors to identify opportunities for reducing waste through good design. Principles around reuse and recovery, off-site construction, material optimisation, waste-efficient procurement, and designing for future deconstruction were used. Laing O'Rourke prefabricated large sections of Crossrail Custom House Station, which you can see in the pictures on the left of the slide, at their Centre of Excellence for Modern Construction in Nottinghamshire, which is Europe's most advanced concrete products manufacturing facility. The promotion of recycled content in construction materials began in 2005 by WRAP, with the recognition that more could be done in the industry to highlight construction products that incorporated recycled content. This was very much the carrot to the stick of many waste materials destined for landfill, incurring tax and using valuable landfill space when they could be diverted for beneficial use within construction products. The net waste tool was developed by WRAP to help identify the building components which contribute the highest recycled content and provide the best opportunities to increase recycled content. In 2010, acting on WRAP's recommendation, we set a target of 15% and a 20% stretch target. Concrete was by far the single most significant component of the Crossrail works, therefore presenting the greatest opportunity for increasing the recycled content by the addition of cement substitutes, such as ground granulated blast furnace slag and pulverised fuel ash. Both of these were specified within standard Crossrail concrete mixes. However, contractors were encouraged to work with their supply chains to identify opportunities to increase these cement replacements still further. Crossrail stations and shafts have numerous internal rooms, the walls of which are made up of blockwork, which you can see in the top right. Several blockwork products that have higher than standard levels of recycled content are available and were used widely across the project. Most of Crossrail's internal flooring comprises terrazzo, which is made from the waste arising from the extraction and cutting process of dimensional granite stone. And as a secondary material, it counts towards Crossrail's overall recycled content. And the bottom right is pictures of the terrazzo. Crossrail has been able to achieve an overall recycled content of 36% by value, indicative of what is possible for this type of construction. The construction of Crossrail resulted in the generation of over 7 million tonnes of excavated material, of which nearly 100% was beneficially reused. Crossrail adopted a client-led approach to the reuse of the material, and the benefits of this approach were that it allowed a significant proportion of the material to be used to create a landmark new nature conservation project at Wallasey Island. It also allowed the development of infrastructure to allow transportation by water and the early allocation of rail paths, which together contributed to 80% per tonne kilometre of the excavated material being transported by rail or water. Nearly half of the total excavated material from the project went to Wallasey Island, where Crossrail created what is now known as Jubilee Marsh. The material was used to create higher and lower ground to restore the wetland landscape of mudflats, salt marsh and lagoons, last seen 400 years ago. The loss of coastal habitat over the past 4 centuries has been dramatic. Without projects like Wallasey Island, rising sea levels are threatening to see another 1,000 hectares lost in the next decade. We also identified 2 alternative sites to Wallasey for handling material generated by early contracts before Wallasey was available and to take any material that was not suitable for disposal at Wallasey. At Ingrabourne, the material was used to create a new golf complex on a site previously used as a municipal landfill at Rainham. And at Fairlop, another old landfill site, It was used as capping and for engineering to create new agricultural and nature conservation areas. Contractors also identified a number of construction waste reuse opportunities, one of which was community wood recycling, which offers a cost-effective and efficient nationwide collection service for all wood waste. This charity collects the wood and either reuses or recycles it depending on the quality, and the majority of our contractors used this charity. Nearly 99% of our construction waste and nearly 100% of our excavated material has been diverted from landfill, which is a fantastic achievement and reflects the inputs by Crossrail and our contractors with waste management processes and initiatives.
Sustainability is not just, of course, about the environment, but it also encompasses promoting a strong and stable economy. And more widely, Crossrail is stimulating regeneration and economic growth. With 1.5 million people brought within 45 minutes of central London, that means the pool of skilled labour available to London business is considerably increased. And as such, that should facilitate their growth, which in turn leads to economic prosperity and more job opportunities. And this is one of the key impacts of Crossrail, contributing significantly to the overall £42 billion economic benefit of the railway. Now, in central London, in order to build our stations and sink our shafts and create our boxes and so forth, we had to demolish a lot of the existing older building stock that was there originally. However, what that did was offer us the opportunities to replace it with new office and residential space. And so we worked with a number of developers to deliver about 3 million square foot of high quality office and residential space at 12 locations above or near our stations. And you can see two of them here. To the left at Hanover Square, Bond Street East. That developer there is Great Portland Estates. And on the right, that's at Farringdon East, a developer known as Helical. And you can actually see the historic Smithfield Market just forming the backdrop there. And independent research has shown that Crossrail will unlock or accelerate the supply of some 57,000 homes and add about 5.5 billion to property values in London. And the residential developments at Woolwich and Limo Peninsula will act as a major stimulus to regeneration in those locations, contributing significantly to the housing targets of those boroughs. But we realised that the Crossrail journey actually begins before you even reach the stations, and there was an opportunity to therefore integrate the oversight development and the stations into the urban realm, creating safe, attractive spaces that people will enjoy moving through and also be attracted to spend some time in and make use of new and existing retail opportunities as they will be. So just to take you very quickly around some of those spaces, moving clockwise from top left, that's the urban realm at our Liverpool Street station. Then moving round North Woolwich, and then Woolwich Station, dropping down Custom House, that's the bottom right, and then coming back the other way, Farringdon Station, and finally bottom left corner, that's Paddington Integrated Project. And these lovely new spaces were created by working closely in collaboration with the local authorities and other stakeholders. And it's a truly lovely outcome. But we didn't just invest in designing urban spaces, we also invested in designing more biodiverse areas.
During the main construction period, the focus has been on protecting wildlife. For example, wild orchids, reptiles, newts and giant eels were all rehomed from the Stockley Junction area in West London. Slow worms were moved from the Old Oak Common worksite, and fish rescues were carried out from the docks at Canary Wharf and the Royal Docks at Connaught Tunnel. Wildlife is supported everywhere across the Elizabeth line, even in the dense, heavily populated urban environment of central London. So it's important that Crossrail saw opportunities to provide green spaces wherever possible. The land surrounding our portal shafts, depots and surface railway to the east and west provided a great opportunity. We identified a number of biodiversity initiatives to turn some of the loss into a gain, from reuse of excavated material to green roofs and landscaping. In central London, where construction sites are surrounded by dense urban infrastructure, biodiverse reefs and brown reefs have been integrated into the designs at some stations and most of the shafts. The shaft head houses have a wildflower turf roof, which is a UK native turf consisting of 41 wildflowers and grasses. And you can see some of our shaft head houses. So the bottom left, that's Eleanor Street shaft, and top right is Limo shaft. The turf naturally produces a biodiverse habitat supporting birds, mammals, bees, butterflies, and other invertebrate species. As part of the C360 Crossrail contract, when Costain Skanska joint venture were reinstating the soft and hard landscaping areas of the Stepney Green shaft, they included an excavation for a pond to be further developed by the London Borough of Tower Hamlets and Stepney City Farm, which is a neighbouring site to our work site. And you can see Stepney City Farm, top left picture. The new Whitechapel Elizabeth line, station ticket hall and walkway, is topped with a green roof of carbon cleansing seed and plants, improving both biodiversity and energy efficiency. And you can see that in the bottom right. Further green roof systems are included on the Durwood Street and Cambridge Heath shafts and GSM building, also located at Whitechapel. And at Woolwich, a brown roof sits above the main Elizabeth line station entrance. And there was also planting around other areas. So you can see in the middle, that is Westbourne Park, where there's been some planting. In June this year, some Crossrail staff, including myself, visited Wallasey to see how the habitat was establishing. In both January 2020 and January 2021, the RSPB counted over 30,000 wintering birds on site across the entire reserve. Other wintering months regularly have counts of 25,000 or more, and these numbers are predominantly made up of a few species: teal, widgeon, grey plover, golden plover, lapwing, dunlin and knot. And about half the birds are found on Jubilee Marsh, which I introduced earlier as the area of Wallasey that Crossrail created and can be seen on the screen in the picture of Wallasey. There have also been good numbers of breeding birds on the island. Over 100 pairs of breeding avocets are found across the reserve, with about 1/3 on Jubilee Marsh. About half of the 2,000 pairs of black-headed gulls and half of their 70 pairs of common terns are found also on the islands in Jubilee Marsh. 25 nationally scarce invertebrate species have been found on the reserve, along with 10 nationally scarce plant species. And 5 of these enjoy the saline and disturbed ground found on the Crossrail created site.
And let's now bring you back into the railway itself. And the health and well-being of the travelling public has been a key consideration throughout our period of design. Because after all, it's all very well providing good travel links to an extended workforce pool, but you want and need that workforce to arrive as fresh as possible, relaxed and ready to go. And to achieve that, you want a punctual, reliable and safe railway. And combining that with airy and spacious stations and rolling stock, Elizabeth Line is designed to achieve just that outcome. In fact, going back to those earlier points about climate change, some of you may know what it's like to travel on the underground at the moment during high summer temperatures, how hot and humid conditions can be, making travelling uncomfortable, if not downright unpleasant at times. But you'll be happy to know the Elizabeth Line trains are all fully air conditioned. And while the new tunnels and stations, well, they'll be naturally cool for years to come, but we've left space so that in the future, air conditioning can be installed on the station platforms should rising temperatures ever warrant it.
Back into construction, and Crossrail was the first UK infrastructure project to set out requirements for emission controls on construction machinery to bring out environmental benefits. It was recognised that during the long construction period, there would be many construction sites spread across London, with each site having a range of large and medium-sized diesel engines working throughout the day, in many cases in close proximity to local communities. Examples of what is known as non-road mobile machinery, NRMM, include generators, crawler and mobile cranes, pumps, excavators and dumper trucks, and forklifts. A performance standard for NRMM was created that set out the standard that contractors were required to meet in relation to emissions control and how it should be demonstrated. This drew upon existing certification schemes within the UK and overseas. Any engine used on a Crossrail site is required to be retrofitted with a diesel particulate filter that is intended to reduce the emissions of particulate matter from the engine. And you can see some of these diesel particulate filters on the far left, that's the Hochtief Murphy, and then also you can see it in the centre. And the far right is actually a crawler crane that we knew was fitted with the right controls. In 2012, less than 40% of all construction plant and equipment on Crossrail construction sites were fitted with diesel particulate filters or cleaner Euro Stage 3B engines. By 2015, this had increased to over 80%. And procedures, processes, and a detailed field guide for compliance had helped to achieve this significant increase. The Crossrail NRMM standards and requirements helped drive the demand across the industry for NRMM fitted with emissions control, and suppliers working on Crossrail upgraded their supply fleet to meet the requirements, which meant the equipment was then available for future projects. The data gathered by Crossrail has been used by the Greater London Authority in developing their proposals for NRMM in the ultra-low emissions zone for London. So Crossrail has raised the bar in the industry for emissions control on major projects, and it's expected that other projects, such as HS2, will build on these requirements moving forward. One of the largest and most extensive archaeology investigations in the UK was incorporated into the Crossrail pre-construction works, which began in 2009. Over 100 archaeologists found tens of thousands of items from 40 sites, spanning 55 million years of London's history and prehistory, dating from prehistoric, Roman and medieval eras and the recent industrial past. The project gave archaeologists an exceptional opportunity to reveal the layer cake of history that is hidden below the city streets. And a few examples. So the excavations in Charterhouse Square, which is Farringdon, uncovered the remains of a cemetery created in 1348 in response to the Black Death. 25 skeletons were found buried in 3 layers, which represent 3 different phases of burial in the 14th and 15th century. In 2015, Crossrail commenced a major archaeological excavation at Liverpool Street's Eastern Ticket Hall site in Broadgate. The Bedlam burial ground lies beneath this site, with an estimated 20,000 Londoners buried there in the 16th and 17th centuries. An archaeologist began excavating over 3,000 skeletons from the Bedlam burial ground in the City of London in March 2015. A team of 60 archaeologists worked in shifts 6 days a week to remove skeletons and carefully record evidence for what may prove to be, in archaeology terms, London's most valuable cemetery site. The excavation was undertaken by the Museum of London Archaeology on behalf of Crossrail, and the bodies have been interred at Willow Cemetery on Canvey Island. More than 135 learning events were delivered, which you can see some of the photos from some of our exhibitions. In addition, school children and members of the public were invited to participate in site-based events and to assist in some of the historical research associated with the burials found at the Bedlam burial ground. The public programme culminated in a final archaeology exhibition in 2017 that showcased 500 of the most exciting discoveries on the project. Delivered in partnership with the Museum of London Docklands, it received nearly 100,000 visitors.
So with 42 kilometres of tunnel and significant excavations for our central section stations, we knew before we procured any design and any main construction contracts that one of our big challenges to deliver the railway was to have a sufficient labour force that was equipped with the necessary tunnelling skills. And therefore, one of the very first constructions of Crossrail, funnily enough, was a building that you are probably never likely to see or visit, which is the Tunnelling and Underground Construction Academy, affectionately known as TUCA, located at Ilford in the London Borough of Redbridge. And you can see the building here on this particular image. So TUCA is a state-of-the-art training facility. It provides training in the key skills required to work in tunnel excavation, underground construction and infrastructure. And since it opened in 2011, well over 20,000 people have trained there to operate effectively and safely in tunnels. And it was modified and expanded to provide training for railway operatives. And indeed, the current Crossrail operations team are being trained there, as are also operatives from London Underground. And the facility is now owned and operated by Transport for London. And the construction of Crossrail represented an incredible opportunity to promote jobs for the benefit of local people, young people new to the jobs market, and for the local long-term unemployed. And we ran various programs. Chief amongst that, we established a free jobs brokerage service that worked in partnership with Job Centre Plus. And Job Centre Plus worked with our main contractors and with a network of local outreach agencies to identify and advertise job vacancies and to help equip local people to compete for those opportunities. So all the job opportunities of our main contractors had to be routed through that brokerage service. And it was a requirement that it was prioritised by them. So there was always 2 days that the brokerage had to advertise those services before our contractors could then advertise them through any alternative routes. And the brokerage service championed several initiatives to improve skills development and employment opportunities for disadvantaged and underrepresented groups. And these included injured former service personnel, unemployed young construction workers, and women. And Crossrail also set itself a target of 400 new apprenticeships working on the scheme for at least 16 weeks. And we've actually achieved 1,000. So we smashed that target, which was truly wonderful. And at the close of that programme, we had achieved just over 4,700 jobs created on the project for local and or long-term unemployed people. And we didn't just stay with that, we sought to inspire the younger generation. And we ran a programme known as Young Crossrail, and we engaged something like 44,000 young people, teachers and parents from about 350 schools, colleges and universities. And the aim of that was seeking to inspire the engineers of the future for the new railway and infrastructure schemes that will inevitably come over on the horizon. And it goes without saying that the delivery of Crossrail has required the investment of a considerable amount of public money. And we were keen, therefore, to make sure that so far as we could, that went also to the benefit of UK businesses. And we ran another number of programs to help facilitate that outcome. So we required that all new opportunities in the supply chain of our main contractors be advertised through a scheme known as Compete For. And Compete For is a website that allows the business community to compete for contract opportunities linked to major buying organisations such as Crossrail, but also includes central and local government. And it basically matches potential suppliers and buyers. We also took our main contractors around the UK on what we called Meet the Contractor events. And at these events, supply-side businesses would learn of the upcoming opportunities, and they would also be provided information on what our contractors were looking for and what a good submission would look like, helping to facilitate, hopefully, a successful return on any bids that they might make. And we maintained what we called a heat map of the regions of the UK, and we could see where procurements were landing. And any region that had very few procurements or no procurements, we would deliberately target those with our Meet the Contractor events. And what that all added up to at the end of the day, well, 96% of the contracts awarded went to companies within the UK. And of those, 62% of them were for suppliers that were based outside London and the South East, and almost the same proportion, another 62%, those were small and medium enterprises. So certainly it did go to the benefit of UK business. And finally, it's also just worth noting that an estimated 55,000 jobs have been supported by Crossrail across the UK.
So talking of legacy, the Crossrail Learning Legacy is the collation of and dissemination of good practice, lessons learned and innovation from the Crossrail construction programme, aimed at raising the bar in the industry and showcasing UK PLC. It aims to share knowledge and insight through means such as case studies and technical papers, providing lessons and recommendations to help other projects. The site contains over 650 documents detailing the learnings from the Crossrail programme and continues to grow as the project approaches completion. Further information on all the sustainability topics that Rob and myself have discussed today are available on the Legacy website, and there are many items that provide much more detail about how we have developed and achieved sustainability on Crossrail and the Elizabeth Line.